Hey guys, Omni here. We're going to be checking out New Rockstar's breakdown for Werewolf by Night. If you haven't seen my reaction to the Marvel special, go check it out. It was a lot of fun, man. I love just how different it felt and fun and energetic and stylized. It was refreshing. I quite enjoyed it. And I know that there's probably a lot of things in the background and that were mentioned and brought up that that went over my head because this is a pocket. I already have very casual knowledge of the Marvel Universe as it is, but this is definitely a pocket where I am completely out of my league, man. Just out of my element. So there's probably a lot in here. So let's go ahead and strap in. If you guys are not subscribed to New Rockstars, go check them out. Link will be in the description. These guys are awesome and perform some amazing breakdowns, and they have some pretty solid merch as well. So check it out. Anyway, guys, let's go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Marvel Studios' Werewolf by Night, the first MCU special presentation from the studio that doubles down on classic horror and unleashes the beasts to the world beyond. Director-composer Michael Giacchino crafted this with incredible production design and details that are easy to overlook. So let's break this down shot by shot for everything you might have missed. Spoiler warning, and let's get started. We open on a new fanfare branding this as a Marvel Studios special presentation.
Yep.
The music and graphics are modeled directly on the 1973 CBS special presentation bumper.
Oh, neat.
This is what a young Michael Giacchino likely would have seen on his TV as a kid when the network would air an exciting one-off special. Now, Michael Giacchino actually composed the Marvel fanfare music we have been hearing in every title since 2016's Doctor Strange, and he composes this new music using the same kind of bongos from the 1973 CBS bumper. Then we go into the main Marvel Studios fanfare, but this gets disrupted and turned black and white by a werewolf slash.
Yep.
Giacchino even syncs
then it
that
changed
slash so that
keys.
it occurs on his normal upswing of the horn section. Dun, 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 ring. And then after this, the music switches to a more sinister minor key version of the music. Also, of course, that swipe is 4 tears from 4 claws of a werewolf's longer digits, not 3, because that's reserved for the slashes of another Marvel hero's snakes. Moon Knight was added to the inner curvature of the R, where Bucky and Rocket previously were, because it's spooky. Male choir voices chant, followed by female choir voices. Can't really make out what they're saying, but it mirrors the partnership of the male Jack with the female Elsa. Then Giacchino's opening title card of Werewolf by Night uses the black and white shadow and film stock quality and even the Roman numeral copyright year from titles like 1933's King Kong and 1941's The Wolfman, 2 big influences on this special. Then we start with the drawings of the 6 OG Avengers.
The known universe, with its heroes and marvels. But what of the darkness?
The narrator is Rick Wasserman, longtime Marvel voice actor who voices Thor in
Oh,
Avengers:
nice.
Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Then we tilt down to the depths beneath the Avengers to an illustration of a goblin creature. It's labeled figure XXVIM, which is not a valid Roman numeral, but the Latin inscription translates to a winged monster by virtue and piety effectively and ominously corrupted. So is this really a goblin, or could it be a vampire?
I'm pretty sure
Beside
that's
this creature are
like
some daggers,
an
presumably
ancient
the weapons
vampire.
needed to kill it. And to the left, a chart of lunar phases. Presumably, we are looking at a book or a journal, a guide kept by Ulysses Bloodstone of creatures that he has hunted over the years. Since the guy's super old, it makes sense that it would be in Latin. This could be an ancient grimoire, like the Necronomicon. The MCU is now using this to show how all of our monsters from folklore exist in this universe, living in the shadows. Then a 2-headed sea creature, looks like a mermaid and a merman, and one slain by a trident with the same kind of serpentine design as the dagger before. Then a fork-tailed beast hunted with arrows by our man Ulysses Bloodstone. This creature's fur waving upward like flames. So Ulysses Bloodstone is a monster hunter from Marvel Comics, first appearing in 1975, but later in 2005, a couple unnamed monster hunters from 2 comics in 1960 were retconned to be the same guy as Ulysses. Ulysses was originally a caveman, kept alive for 10,000 years from a shard of the alien
fucking
blood
Vandal
gem
Savage.
used in his chest. As the MCU did turning the Infinity Gems into the Infinity Stones, so does this title, making the Blood Gem into the Blood Stone, a powerful relic of of sorcery, worn as a necklace, and used to weaken monsters and reveal their true natures. Could its origins be connected to the cosmic infinity stones, or maybe even with the vibranium that also arrived to Earth via meteorite? Be more theories on that at the end of the video. Then a drawing of the actual bloodstone, labeled lapis e sanguine, which is Latin for bloodstone.
Yep.
Beneath that, Latin translating to bloodstone family, and then either monsters or demons saving humanity, or saving humanity from monsters and demons. It's subtle syntax, but it is a major difference. Either way, though, the bloodstone family must have a bit of evil in their blood to fight these things off. Then on the right, we see Ulysses rocking a questionable fit, using the bloodstone to repel Bigfoot. The caption reading,
Is that
Ulysses
Bigfoot? Yep,
bloodstone fights a
Sasquatch.
Sasquatch, also known as Bigfoot in British Columbia. The lunar phases that we saw before with the vampire goblin thing are now surrounding 5 historic monster hunters from across cultures. There's one in a suit of armor, then there's a warrior who looks like he's from the Middle East, then Ulysses in the center, who's actually carrying the same axe that Joven will later find in the maze, a hunter in chainmail, and then it looks like a warrior from ancient Asia. There are 5 of them in total, just like the 5 invited hunters to tonight's ritual. Elsa made it 6 because they didn't expect her to show. On the left is a row of weapons and then a chalice with what reminds this baptized Catholic of Holy Communion. The Latin translates to ritual with the cup and the full moon. And to the right, a goat creature is impaled on a stump, maybe a sacrifice to initiate this ritual. So this may be depicting the process of selecting a new bloodstone successor, or coming together of all the people who are part of this society. Notice that the lunar phases include waxing and waning crescents and waxing and waning gibbouses, and a new moon, but no full moon is shown, as if these ancestral hunters knew never to conduct this ritual on the night of a full moon.
He'll probably bring it up, but like they did say the next full moon's in 5 days from this point. And I mean, the moon looks a little more than 5 days away from a full, but if we're looking at the calendar, the bloodstone at the bottom, at that lunar calendar that was in there, the bloodstone's at the bottom. If the ritual to pass it on is at the bottom, I mean, it would represent the full moon in that circle, because it's opposite the new moon, and it goes around at the bottom, and the bloodstone's where the full moon would be.
And the last illustration shows Ulysses dead.
Don't know if that means
Fortis et
anything.
Virtuti, meaning strong and free. And then on the right, his epitaph translates to Ulysses, son of Septimus Bloodstone, was slain on the last full moon
That is
of the
a
year
weird
and
name.
at the end of the bloodshed. So this tells us
Septimus.
that this Ulysses Bloodstone was not originally a caveman. He was part of a lineage of monster hunters.
What would that
and a
mean?
father named Septimus. But this also tells us that Ulysses was killed on a full moon. Interesting. So did he die at the hands of a werewolf? Could it have been Jack himself to initiate the succession ritual so that he could infiltrate and free his
Oh, that would be an interesting twist.
friend man thing?
But that does go back to what I just said.
But we crossed us all from the drawing of the moon to the actual moon in the sky. Again, this is not a full moon yet, as Jack will later say he has 5 days until the next one. Jack arrives in this Bloodstone Temple, the door slowly rising from his feet, and the first thing we see is his medallion hanging from his hands. As
You know,
he walks down this hall, you'll notice he
maybe
suddenly appears
it
wearing
could go
now,
full
meaning
in
that
5
this is just a
days at that
decorative thing that he
position. It
wears
looked
to
a little
blend in with the
more
rest of the
full than I
society, Not
recall.
really a badge that he's actually proud of. So Jack Russell in the comics is Werewolf by Night, born Jacob Rusoff, a son of a Transylvanian with an ancestral lycanthrope curse dating back to Dracula's werewolf in the 18th century, a curse that was reawakened in the 20th century by the Darkhold. Jack Russell first appeared in Marvel Spotlight 1972, and in the MCU is actually referenced in episode 2 of Moon Knight, WBN0032, appearing on the bus, Werewolf by Night number 32
Right.
being Moon Knight's first comic appearance. Gael García Bernal plays Jack, making this the second time Bernal and Giacchino have collaborated after Pixar's Coco, for which Giacchino composed the score, and Bernal voiced and sang the role of Uncle Hector. You'll notice Jack wears similar face paint here as we saw decorating many of the skulls in Coco, reflecting the tradition of the Mexican holiday of Dia de los Muertos. Jack goes into this a bit later.
God, I love
like
that
your whole
movie.
Look there with the makeup, some killer trademark.
Yeah, it's to honor my ancestors.
Now, the entrance hallway is decorated with these murals depicting more monster slayings and various Latin phrases. On the left side, extremum vitae spiritum etere, translating roughly to the end of life consumed spirit. Really, it's a Latin phrase used in relation to death, meaning to give up the ghost. To the right of that, further down on the left wall, the center section, fere pericula quae vident figuint, translating to the wild beasts flee the dangers which they see. And then at the far end of the left wall, only visible in later scenes, Victoria aut mors vocare ad regnum vivat rex, translating to victory or death, call to kingdom, long live the king. But then on the wall to Jack's right,
Now tell me that one. Well, fucking paused at the wrong time here. Let me... That one on the left here, tell me that doesn't look like comic gore.
Right, closest to him is Omnes una manet nox truncare, roughly translating to one night waits to shorten. Further down, we know from the other later shots it says Homo sum humani nil ami alinium puto. Latin puto, not other putos. This is actually a quote from Roman playwright Terence, translating to I am a human being, I consider nothing human alien to me. And then at the far end on the right wall, closest to the door, Monstrum nota res mala optima, which I think means a monster is nothing bad, it's the best. So altogether, both sides of these walls represent the argument that this story is having with itself. The left side represents a more hostile mindset of man versus beast, of war and death. The right side is really the opposite of that argument. Phrases begging for empathy, seeing a common humanity in monsters, even a werewolf wanting a shorter night so that he can return to human form and stop killing. Giacchino said he was inspired by movies like King Kong and wanted us to see the deeper soul in the monsters that we typically flee from and hunt. That
Man, King Kong's such a good
these
movie.
Monsters are just humans that need our help. This temple is filled with mounted trophy heads of Ulysses' beasts, including the ones depicted in the opening illustrations, paintings beside each of them depicting their slayings. This includes a painting for Ulysses. His coffin is center with a rifle and a sword crossed over it. Both of these weapons will be used later on, and in this painting, the bloodstone is glowing from his chest. The music playing on a record player in the background is Irving Berlin's 1934 song, I Never Had a Chance, a song playing in the hearts of all these hunters, eager for a chance to wield the bloodstone next. It's not specifically defined what year this is set in, but Giacchino only really uses songs from the 1930s and 1940s. Now, guarding this room are guards that look like TVA hunters, but they don't seem to be based on the context of the story. The other hunters include Verusa, Azarel, and Liorn. Covering the shelves are various objects throughout history.
I said in my reaction, I thought that guy looked like a camouflage sorcerer, and I think I kept referring to him as such, but I figure, I mean, if he was really trying to kill this thing and he could use magic, I'm sure he would have, so probably just a misread on the garb, much like with the previous theories regarding those guards being TVA agents.
Included a Roman helmet and a Sphinx statue. Billy Swan notifies Verusa that Elsa has arrived, and as Verusa passes it, the bloodstone now begins to glow red in this black and white
The only color until the end.
Glow red when we first saw it on screen moments earlier. It was only Elsa's arrival that activated it, so that we now see its color beyond this monotone filter. Like, it was always red to these characters, but now to the viewer, the stone has only come alive when its rightful possessor has come near. This whole concept of Technicolor.
Oh, I thought it was because he got near it.
Used by Steven Spielberg and Schindler's List, and more recently in the MCU, the blinking red light on the Stark toaster in the commercial in WandaVision Episode 1. This use of color is designed to draw our attention to punctuated violence in an otherwise numbing or
You know, I've never seen all of Sin City, but I've seen like a fair amount of it, and it's a very visually interesting movie. Another one that comes to mind is The Spirit? Also never seen it, but I remember seeing the trailers for it and the cover art for it. I think like the red scarf or something like that was visible.
Sensitized mise-en-scène.
The only color.
As in WandaVision, this is an indicator that a Technicolor meta-reality will soon be revealed. Jack meets the hunter Joven.
I can almost smell the blood in your hands.
Yeah, a little nod to Jack having a bit of heightened smelling senses, that of a canine.
Nice.
Joven is actually played by Kirk Thatcher, and this isn't his first MCU appearance. This guy started as an ILM creature designer who played the boombox punk in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, and reprised a similar guy in Spider-Man: Homecoming. Now, that guy was a New Yorker. Joven sounds like a Scotsman, probably not the same character. Joven was the one of these hunters to greet Jack warmly, but he's also the first to try to kill him in the maze, revealing this warmness is actually part of his deception game. Jack points to the goblin vampire monster head.
But him I fought a few times. He's never looked so alive.
And again, this was the first monster we saw in the opening illustrations. And the fact that this monster was transformed by being corrupted makes it interesting that he has a history with Jack Russell, who transforms into a werewolf instead of being a monster full time. Verusa greets Elsa Bloodstone at the door.
My like what I said in the reaction, at least for that too, where he said it never looked so alive. We learn later that part of the ritual is putting the bloodstone on the creature, which causes it pain, weakens it, but also makes it extremely erratic and violent. You know, it's upsetting to it. It hurts it, but it makes it want to fight back and strain and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of how I interpreted it. Went later, once we learned that, it was like maybe that it was used on him. And he, in his dying moments of that rage, adrenaline, and fervor, is what he means by he's never looked more alive. Maybe because in life, maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was more docile than that. So who knows? Kind of coming around to Man-Thing, who in this was very much just a humble creature wanting to mind its own business, is just getting poked and prodded by all these people for their games, misunderstood and ostracized. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it too much.
Also, Bloodstone being the daughter of Ulysses Bloodstone in the comics, and a recurring badass monster hunter in recent comics. At one point, she does team up with the Midnight Suns, but Verusa challenges her.
What aspect of the Bloodstone are we after exactly? The strength it lends? The protection? Longevity?
Verusa, what I do with it after I've earned it will be none of your business.
Yeah, it really seems like Elsa doesn't want the Bloodstone for its powers, but really just to keep Verusa from passing it on to someone less worthy. Verusa goes around announcing their kill numbers: 26 for Brasso, 37 for Azrael, 43 for Leorn, 57 for Joven, and over 100 for Jack. This tells us that at some point Jack managed to coordinate his monthly werewolf transformations to position himself to slay monsters when he was in werewolf form. And assuming that he'd only be able to coordinate one target per full moon, and there's 12 full moons in a year, that means that he's been a werewolf doubling as a fellow monster hunter for around 9 years. Now, all of these characters wear the same medallion that marked them as part of this Bloodstone society, except Elsa, who has no medallion since she parted ways with it. It's also interesting that we never hear what Elsa's kill number is. They all assume she's inexperienced, but in reality, her kill number could be a lot higher. And I love how Elsa interrupts Verusa by dragging the chair across the room, much like the irreverent but ultimately most qualified Agent J in Men in Black.
Yeah. That's what I was thought of too.
The backside
Best of the
Ulysses'
best of the
coffin
best,
reads this
sir.
end up, and when Billy inserts the crank, a little puff of dust blows out. Based on Ulysses' state of decay, how long has this guy really been dead? Is this really his corpse, or could it be an animatronic replica that he had made before he died? Whatever this Ulysses spot is, lays out the rules.
I read it as it was
Monster
actually his
surrounds, and whoever
corpse.
kills it first will
Who
claim the
knows?
Bloodstone. He signs off with,
Good luck. I'll be rotting for you.
I love it.
This guy stinks!
yeah, exactly the kind of cheesy pun the Crypt
Love
Keeper would
it.
make in Tales from the Crypt. Verusa says that no weapons will be allowed other than some that have been scattered around the maze. It sounds like all these weapons will be ones formerly owned by Ulysses, making this plot also feel a lot like the movie Clue.
You know, when I looked in on this, when we're like zooming in from the overhead of this area, I was like, this looks like a multiplayer like FPS map. And we was like, only weapons you can use are the ones that are found scattered throughout the land. I was like, so it really is like an arena shooter map now that I'm thinking about it.
A bunch of eccentric characters gather to this house, each having access to a set amount of weapons. Verusa lays
Fucking
out the
Quake
stakes.
up in
There is
here.
only one Bloodstone. And it can have only one keeper.
I love how the Bloodstone's red light forms a lens flare across the camera pretty much every time it's shown, almost as if its redness is eager to jump off the screen to break this reality. Verusa also warns that not all of them will survive.
Those who do not survive will be honored appropriately. For tonight, it is every hunter for themselves.
Giacchino cross-dissolves, creating this perfectly aligned superimposition of the skull over Verusa's face, foreshadowing how one of the night's victims will be herself, and recalling Hitchcock's final shot of Psycho that superimposed over Norman Bates' face the skull of his mother.
God, I love Psycho. It's one of my favorite fucking movies of all time, man.
Jack draws the tile, meaning that he will enter the maze first, led by a flaming tuba player who, according to the credits, is actor David Silverman, which is also the name of the actor who played Jen Walters' potential employer in She-Hulk episode 2, but it is a fairly common name. Could just be two different guys. I just love this tuba torch. It's very Mad Max Fury Road, and I love how it functions
Never
both
seen
as a
it.
torch to light the way, but also an announcement of every new maze entry, and let's be honest,
Yeah.
a completely foreboding sound of doom as the rest of them
Yeah,
chant.
man,
We
I
spill
love
the blood
it.
for the hunt, for stone and creed, for those who forged our own blade, to rid this land of its abominations. There is no peace without blood, and so it shall be. And I have to address this. Those who forged our own blade. Obviously, part of this monster hunting tradition in the MCU is gonna involve our man Blade, but Giacchino said that behind the scenes they discussed should they bring in Blade and decided ultimately no, that he doesn't need to be part of this story. As Jack makes his way into the maze, we see it from a high angle, and if you look closely, you can see Man-Thing's shadow lumbering around the background in the upper right. This plot
Oh, I
structure
didn't
of hunters
notice that.
forced into a maze to search for a monster, of course based based on the Greek myth of the Minotaur in the Labyrinth. The Minotaur was eventually slain by the great hero Theseus, but this story's plot subverts that with this awesome twist. The monster is not one that we have to slay. The monster is a damsel in distress whom we must save. Interesting to note, though, that the English language uses maze and labyrinth synonymously, but historically, maze refers to a puzzle with multiple choices of paths, whereas the labyrinth is meant to be a unicursal path, a singular path to the center. So in that sense, the labyrinth has come to symbolize something more elemental, a destined journey that we all must go on, a spiral that goes deeper and deeper into our own subconscious as we must face our own inner fears. Now, Jack initially wanders the maze in this 40-second unbroken shot, and he nearly finds Man-Thing. He actually approaches a hedge wall where Ted is actually hiding, but he turns away when the tuba blows for the second hunter. Yeah, they definitely would have made contact there if that next hunter didn't arrive right then. Elsa finds a phonograph, which now plays 1939's Wishing Will Make It So, written by B.G. De Silva, sung by Vera Lynn. Since this is kind of a Wizard of Oz dream quest for Elsa, this challenge is largely a matter of this heroine wishing there's no home like the Bloodstone. But Joven attacks.
I'll get to that later.
Death is coming for you, lassie!
Yeah, up in the right corner, there was a cue mark. Cue marks appear on film frames to cue the projectionist to switch over to the next reel. In this special, cue marks sync with the structure of the acts. Here, we are switching into Act 2, with the hunters in the maze and Elsa and Jack getting to know each other. Another cue mark.
Oh, I didn't know that's what those were. I honestly didn't. I thought they were like imperfections in the film, like a burn in the editing process or something like that, where there was like a scorched hole in the film. That was always what I assumed they were.
Will appear at the end of the second act when Verusa catches Jack, signaling the shift into Act 3, where they go back into the temple. Elsa follows a steamy footprint and a steamy handprint on the wall toward the central mausoleum where Leorn is hiding, meaning Man-Thing must have chased Leorn into the mausoleum, and Leorn must have been afraid of Man-Thing because that acid only excretes when the victim feels fear. After Elsa cuts off Leorn's arm, she instinctively kicks it away, knowing that it's still a usable weapon, arguably even more dangerous now that it's severed, because you know you can tote it around. And during the fight between these two, Giacchino scores it with the psycho strings. One thing I love about good horror action is how a body post-mortem can create a new burden, whether it's a zombie resurrecting or a xenomorph's acid blood burning through everything, or in this case, Elsa having to cover Leorn's mouth, a mouth that has been wedged open by her arrow in order to keep Joven from hearing them. Solutions creating new problems.
Yeah.
Jack returns to the hedge wall with Man-Thing, where a classic Jurassic Park style jump scare turns into a delightful twist. Yes, this is Man-Thing. Man-Thing is Dr. Ted Sallis in the comics from a team trying to recreate the super soldier serum in the Florida Everglades, but he gets
as everybody does
and injects himself with the test serum and crashes his car into the swamp where mystic forces from an interdimensional rift leading to the nexus of all realities transform Ted into a plant matter humanoid who senses emotion. He gets enraged by fear
The green?
and burns those who feel fear and touch him due to him secreting a kind of acid. Yes, the nexus of all realities is a big part of Man-Thing comics.
Wow.
So yeah, this guy
I didn't know
is a
that.
being spawned from the multiverse. The creature design here is pretty great. It's a comic accurate mix of vines and moss and fungi and roots, but with just enough humanity in his eyes so that we love him. Man-Thing is performed by Carrie Jones, part of the effects team of this and a number of titles over the years. And recently
that
played
Predator.
Lion Santa in the Book of Boba Fett. Additional vocalizations were done by longtime Marvel editor Jeffrey Ford. Jack says,
Well, you keep saying that you're gonna be careful each time, and here we go again. You can't keep counting on me to save you. This is the last time.
yeah, it makes us wonder what trouble or capture Ted got in before, like maybe he was captured by Blade or groups like Stake or the MI-13 or by the DODC. Jack locks himself in with Elsa, and in this room are a number of sarcophagi with names that might connect to crew or friends of production. You see Jacob Howell McDougal, born July 1861, died March 1907. There's actually a Marvel VFX assistant coordinator named Samantha McDougal. Then there's another one born June 1884, died not too long later, September 1892. And then there's another one, Brian something, born August 1842, died December 1939. David Long, born June 12th, 1882, died February 28th, 1961. David Long is actually a prop maker on this title. This guy probably constructed this himself. Then Mika Brandonin Clayla, born May 5th, 1885, died February 28th, 1961. Brandon Clayla is an art director and former Disney Imagineer who's actually a friend of Michael Giacchino. And then Jorge Dualos Ralfones, born July 17th, 1880, died February 28th, 1961. Interestingly, these past three all died on the same day, February 28th, 1961.
Oh, wow.
It was probably the same thing that killed all three of them. Annabelle Andrea Graciela, born 1922, died 1968. Griffith Berkey Wondonsky, born January 4th, 1935, died September 17th, 1966. Beverly something, born September 7th, 1932, died November 12th, 1986. And 1986 suggests that despite the 1930s aesthetics of all this is likely taking place in the present day. And then of course Elsa's aunt, Frances Brisbane Bloodstone, born 1873, died 1922. So these two talk about family.
But all families have something in common. They follow us for good or for bad. They stay like they become an atmosphere.
Both of these hunters inherited their natures from their fathers. In Elsa's case, this following her like an atmosphere explains why we are seeing this in black and white. Black and white was how her father Ulysses saw the world. Black and white, good versus evil, man versus monster. And this narrow view still shapes Elsa's literal atmosphere until her perspective finally changes in the final scene. Elsa smashes open Frances's coffin.
She was positive that she'd come
We're on
back
the
from
same
dead
page.
at some point.
Yeah, it sounds like Aunt Frances believed in a zombie uprising, maybe setting the stage for Marvel zombies in the MCU. Jack advises about Man-Thing.
When you run into him, just treat him like an old friend. Call him by his name.
Which is?
Ted.
Yeah, notice how Joven doesn't call him by his name or tell him he loves him. It's because Joven feels the fear. Man-Thing secretes his toxin that fries Joven's head. But Elsa's able to connect with the monster.
Ted?
And Man-Thing's eyes go from spread out ink blots to more condensed irises, helping us connect with him emotionally. Jack blows the wall, Man-Thing runs out, and Elsa uses the clamp to snag the bloodstone from his shoulder. But Jack touches it and it burns him. Since this stone is an analog for the ruby slippers, it's similar to how those slippers initially burned the undeserving in The Wizard of Oz. Later on, Jack apologizes for not telling Elsa.
I'm an idiot, I know. But I'm also a human. Perhaps not in the category that you would call a human.
Yeah, he scratches himself, his canine instincts coming out. Once Jack realizes that Verusa is going to use that bloodstone to turn him prematurely, he looks around the temple at each of the heads on the wall. And at first it seems like he's just worried he's going to be the next mounted head on that wall, but actually he is registering dark parts of the room where he can later perch to hide. And actually the final winged beast that he looks at is exactly where he hides later. He warns Elsa not to break eye contact, which of course is how canines communicate dominance, and he smells her body.
I need to remember you.
Does it work?
Once.
So who was that lucky partner? Jack has had romantic partners in the comics, a girlfriend named Roxana, an affair with Morbius, Living Vampire's ex, Martine Bancroft. But I'm wondering if his forever person could be Ted. I'm just saying we could all be so lucky to find ourselves a fungal humanoid who brings us coffee in the morning. Verusa uses the bloodstone to transform Jack, and as he changes, Giacchino uses another long take, but keeps the camera on Elsa just to convey her fear and her unwillingness to break eye contact. Jack's transformation is actually shown in the shadow on the wall behind her, and Giacchino says this was all done in camera, no VFX, meaning that in order to pull that off, they must have had to time the strobe light to swap in one stand-in for another in the costume that would show the fur as a shadow.
Damn, that's crazy.
Putting that second actor closer to the light source so that he would appear larger on the wall. And when the bloodstone finishes changing him, it releases a little shockwave. Of it. It's like a little burp from the sentient saying, that's enough. But Jack escapes, and as the smoke clears, the hunters search the room looking for the werewolf until the camera tilts up and we see him hiding in plain sight, revealing his position only by his eyes suddenly glowing.
Yeah, it took me a second to see him before he jumped.
The creepiest shot in the movie Hereditary, when the character is crouched in the dark corner of the ceiling in plain sight, and it takes us over a minute to even see her. Giacchino gives us this master reveal shot of the werewolf, lights flickering on his face, but his eyes continuing to glow. And they use practical prosthetics for this character, evoking the Wolfman and the movie monsters of that era. But I love how his ancestral face paint remains on his skin. Giacchino also uses a dolly zoom effect here, a famous shot in horror, and in this case, making it look like the werewolf is floating toward us, kind of like Dracula in those classic films. Jack bites Barasso's ear, and then Elsa helps out, grabbing her father's sword and then knocking Barasso's neck against it. Youch! Actually love how you can see Billy peeking out behind the casket, reacting to all this in shock. Giacchino uses a pretty impressive long take now that actually starts in the main room and then follows the guard as Jack throws him across the screen into the entrance hallway. And we stay in this fight. Jack rips open a guy so that his blood spills on the camera and oozes down with the same exact speed as the gradually closing gate in the background. Such great shot composition here. And at several points, notice how Jack could escape, but he clearly chooses not to, as bloodthirst has overtaken this werewolf. He will not finish ambitious level until he gets 100% clearance rate. Meanwhile, Elsa uses her father's sword to slay Azrael, probably the most brutal live-action kill we have seen in the MCU to date. And after she pulls Verusa away from him, Jack pins Elsa, but she never breaks eye contact and caresses his face, showing empathy for the monster, and he flees into the night. But Verusa lifts Ulysses' rifle to shoot Elsa, but Man-Thing drops in and kills her, tossing her grizzly corpse into Ulysses' coffin, making this coffin flop a corncob TV outtake.
I didn't rig shit.
I actually asked the producer on this title, Brian Gay, about the relative depictions of violence in all this. I found it interesting. No guns are really fired aside from when Verusa nearly fires it, but that's when Man-Thing gets her. Do you see that as the distinction, gun violence versus more old school fantasy weaponry?
We wanted to set the idea that this monster hunting culture is steeped in lore, right? And these people have been doing it forever. They didn't start yesterday. It's been centuries. It's been eons. And so we thought it was more fun that they would be skilled and talented with sort of more, medieval or older style weapons or things like that. I will say that I much prefer watching a sword fight than a gunfight. I think it's more visceral, and specifically in the close quarters of the maze.
The Bloodstone turns Elsa back into color, revealing her jacket to be red, suggesting that she was always destined to inherit this stone the whole time. We hear the famous Judy Garland over the rainbow from The Wizard of Oz, painting Elsa as the Dorothy of this story, the girl who defeated the Wicked Witch to keep the ruby treasure that always belonged to her. Ironically, whereas Dorothy's homecoming was a transition from Technicolor back to sepia, this is the opposite. Elsa's nightmare was black and white, and her awakening takes her back into color. I actually chatted with actress Laura Donnelly about the deeper meaning of this color shift, whether it's something Elsa experiences in her point of view as well. I wanted to ask you about that color shift at the end of this set to Over the Rainbow. I love this moment. It's a shift in color for the viewer, but it also feels like an emotional moment for Elsa. I want to ask you how you think Elsa sees it. Was her world always in color until that moment, and now we are finally seeing it the way she does? Or do you think she might have been living in a black and white world until that moment?
I think that there is definitely a psychological aspect to that black and white turned into color, and I think for Elsa something has clicked in. So I think it is a bit more like she has been in that black and white, or that that shaded kind of world, and now she feels like she has come home, but in a more genuine way than when she first walked through the door of her family home.
One cannot help but draw a line between this scarlet colored
I'm just going to play the clip from my reaction from
Magic and WandaVision, especially when that magic
I don't think I could say it better or recreate it. And then the transition towards the end, this was the mundane world, this was the reality. Like if we use the parallel to Over the Rainbow that was used at the end, where the transition of going over the rainbow, we go from black and white from her life in Kansas into the land of Oz, where things are better, magical even, is where the color is. So like, I saw that as this was the cruelty. This was the reality of the world. The black and the white throughout this thing was them trying to break free of that. This ostracization of monsters, or these abominations as they were, these non-human entities that walk among them, is this reality where they're being hunted and persecuted. And that's kind of the violent world they live within. Now, once the Elsa and Jack succeed in the end, and Man-Thing gets to run free and they get to be together, and she's got the Bloodstone and she's running the family, that's when things can maybe be a brighter, better future with this understanding, because she went to get away to not follow in her father's footsteps and any of this stuff and carve her own path. And through that, she's also made this connection and garnered this understanding that things aren't black and white like that, and that there's more shades in the between afterwards, when she has this little like, oh yeah, he went that way with Ted, and this moment where she was able to stave off Jack's transformation from taking her down too, because she listened, she adapted, treated it like a creature, a fellow creature, respected it, didn't break that eye contact. He's got the scent and all that, and he's had the wherewithal within to at least just let her be. So like, there's this understanding that maybe after this, with this new, person in control of the Bloodstone, this family, that maybe there's a future for people like Jack and Man-Thing to just kind of maybe meld in and not be persecuted. I don't know. I may be way too thought into that, But that's what it made me think of almost immediately after that.
X reality. And then later, between episodes 2 and 3, that reality shifted from black and white to color. This tint of sorcery all seems to have similar effects in the MCU. And it could be that the Bloodstone, the Reality Stone, the Darkhold, and Wanda could all be different wells, tapping into the same current of chaos magic that courses through reality in the MCU. We see that this music is playing from the record player in Man-Thing and Jack's camp, meaning Man-Thing must have placed that record in the stylus with his plant fingers. I love it. And here now in color, we actually see that Ted has a splash of color himself. This sweet yellow flower on his shoulder, like he's wearing a boutonniere, a flower that matches the yellow flower on the mug that he hands Jack. I'm telling you, these two are the most adorable couple. Clearly they have some history, and these two have seen each other at their worst, and they share an affection that keeps them from attacking each other. Empathy for monsters wins out. And as Judy Garland's voice hits that final note, Giacchino closes with "The End" in the same cursive font as the final shot of The Wizard of Oz. And as we do at the end of that film, we now wonder, was this all a dream? Did anything we just saw have any bearing on the reality that we know, in this case, the canonicity of the MCU? Of course it will!
Yeah.
Elsa, Bloodstone, Werewolf by Night, Man-Thing, all of these guys can return in titles like Blade, Agatha Coven of Chaos, and someday the Midnight Suns. Because now we know it's not just people who need saving in the MCU, it's the monsters as well. You can follow me on TikTok,
Hell yeah,
Instagram,
man.
and Twitter at
Great,
@boss. Follow
great
me, Rockstars.
breakdown,
Subscribe to me,
man.
Rockstars, for more
It was
announcements,
such a
everything you love.
great
Thanks for watching. Bye.
special. And I hope we get more of these things. I know the next one is the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. Because after She-Hulk drops its finale next week, the only MCU thing we have on Disney Plus, for that matter, for the rest of the year is that. I think Secret Invasion is the next thing, and we don't necessarily have a date for that, except that it's sometime next year. Which is going to be strange, not having some content on Disney Plus, at least Marvel related, that we'll be jumping around to. We'll still have Andor going on for about 8 more weeks. We have Tales of the Jedi. We've got Willow starting at the end of November. And then I think Bad Batch is in January also. So yeah, it's going to be weird. It's going to be interesting. But yeah, I love this breakdown, man. All the thematic points of view and all that. The camera work, the psychological elements of it all. Just the detail in every scene too, especially with all the Latin, all the lore built into it, and symbology. Man, I really enjoyed this special, and I do hope that we visit more pockets of this type of the universe in the MCU in the future. You know, like you said, we do have Blade coming. We do have the Black Knight set up as well. We have lots of other mystical elements open for the exploration that I really hope we do dive into eventually. So this was fun. This was a great one, man. Follow New Rockstars if you're not already. Let me know your thoughts. Was there anything that you caught that maybe they missed? Sound off the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll carry on the conversation after the video. Feel free to join us in our Discord. We can talk about it there as well. Links to that in all my social description box below. Follow me in each and every one of those. Before we go, I want to shout out our channel legends. Manny Sheriff, Philly Vane, Yori Korscom, Margaret Grace, Melita, Robert Anguiano, Raven McCann, Status Alive, Jeffrey Hale, and M. Sephiroth. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. That's it for this video, guys. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody.